Hi, my name's Kevin Noren. I'm a United States Chess Federation Life Master, which isn't quite the level of an International Master or Grand Master, but it means I'm above average. And I'd like to show you this game I found in this book called Relax with Chess. It's a book from 1948 by Fred Reinfeldt, author of many, many chess books. Now, that's a strange title, Relax with Chess. I mean, don't people want a book that tells them how to win in 20 moves or less? Well, let's take a look at this. Oh, well, look at what we got here. Relax with chess and win in 20 moves. Anyway, I found a game in this book that caught my eye because of the diagram, and I'd like to show you this game, which is very entertaining, and I'll show you why it caught my eye, because it bore a resemblance to a game that I had played. But I have to tell you that playing over games is one of the best ways that you can improve your game. You should do it conscientiously, though, as though you're playing over your own game. That's where you get ideas. A student of mine once said something about, what about pattern recognition? Is that a good way to learn? I said, well, yes, but first you got to learn some patterns. Well, I'll show you some patterns right now. So this game was played in 1942 between somebody named De Fossey and somebody named Franck in Brussels. And neither of these guys are famous masters, but that was kind of the point of Reinfeldt showing this, that sometimes even somebody that's not a famous master can play their game of a lifetime. So let's go on with the game. It starts with d4, knight f6. The opening moves are fairly well known. It's a pretty common opening, and we won't go into too much detail on it. But c4, very typical. e6, knight f3. Also knight c3 can be played, allowing the Nimzo-Indian. But this knight f3 was played, which allows the Queen's Indian, which is a close relative of the Nimzo-Indian. They both try to prevent white by controlling the e4 square from white taking the center by getting his pawn up there. So after b6, knight c3, white again wants to play e4 and grab that center, and the bishop comes to b7 just in time to stop it. Now white plays just a simple developing move, e3. More aggressive possibility was maybe to play bishop to g5. But there's all sorts of possibilities in the open that we won't go into all of them. But at any rate, this was played, and then black played bishop to b4. Now we have, by transposition, a variation of the Nimzo-Indian defense, which is characterized by this bishop on b4. And when you're playing that, the Nimzo-Indian, you've got to be pretty much prepared to give up your bishop for the knight. Now, white plays queen to c2. Maybe he's afraid of getting doubled pawns, and he's also controlling this e4 square again, still wanting to get that in. And because of this pin and the bishop on b7, black can go ahead and play knight to e4 anyway, because the queen can't take because it's protected and this knight is pinned. So, continuing this theme of the struggle for the e4 square, white plays bishop to d3, developing a piece and hitting this knight again. And now black, he wants to keep that knight there as long as he can and plays f5. Again, the struggle for the e4 square. So, again, the struggle for the e4 square continues, and black supports his knight with f5. And this nice knight, white has more space over the board, but black is, with his good control of the e4 square, is really preventing white from doing all sorts of things. And incidentally, with this move f5, the game is actually transposed into a position that could have easily come about from a Dutch defense. But after f5, white loses patience a little bit over the situation here with the bishop pinning the knight, and plays a3. Now when I play the Nimzo-Indian defense, that's the kind of move I like to see, because as I said, when you play the Nimzo-Indian, you're ready to give up that bishop for the knight anyway. So this amounts to pretty much a loss of tempo, forcing black to do, hey, I wanted to take this knight anyway. Now, because of the knight protecting this square, white must take with the pawn. White's got double pawns. It's not too relevant for this game, but let's go on. Black now castles. I think that's reasonably obvious. White does the same. However, this looks a little bit dangerous because of this nasty diagonal aiming towards the king. But is there anything there yet? I don't know yet. But Black sees the opportunity, and this is a very typical kind of attack, to play the rook up to f6. That's what was played. So the rook can swing to g6 or h6. This is called a rook lift. And if you're going to do this, you better be reasonably sure you've got something going on here. Because if the attack doesn't work, the rook could end up misplaced on the side of the board. But Black has a good development, and he's got these active pieces. He sees the opportunity. Now White gets a little fearful. He wants to swap some pieces off because he kind of realizes that Black is up to a nasty little attack here. And Black plays his rook to h6. Now this is getting really menacing because now Black is threatening to bring his queen down here, threatening mate. If the move h3, then the rook can shift over to g6, and then it's threatening. Queen takes h3 because of the pin. And at this point, probably White's best move is just get rid of this knight. Black has, I think, the better game in any case, but White was so afraid of this move, queen to h4, he played g3 just to stop it. Meanwhile, boy, look at this diagonal. It's like totally clear. I wonder what White's reaction was after Black's next move, which was to play the very move that White thought he prevented, queen to h4. That's kind of a shocking little move here. I imagine White had to recover a little bit. Now, this move threatens to checkmate White right on the spot on h2, and so of course we have, what if the pawn takes the queen? Well, then the rook checks. There's no way to interpose. The king must go in the corner to h1, and then we have knight takes f2, double check. The knight checks, but the rook can't take the knight because the bishop is checking. White can't block the bishop's check because the knight is checking. There's only one way to respond to a double check, and that's to move the king, but the king has nowhere to go. This square is covered by the rook, this by the rook and the bishop. So that's what happens if White takes the queen. So we still have this threat of queen takes h2 checkmate to contend with. The only thing for White to do now is to play knight f3, going right back to where it came from to defend this square. And now White's threatening to take the queen with both the pawn and the knight. And Black plays another surprising move. Knight to g5. This is given 3 exclamation points in the book. Maybe that's excessive, but it is a pretty move. Now, Black is threatening to take the knight and then checkmate. And the knight can't be taken because of checkmate still. So this knight needs to defend this square. So there is no good move. White decides to take the queen with the pawn and see if Black knows what he's doing. So now, knight takes knight check. That's reasonably obvious. We've got a piece now. Black has given up the queen, so Black better have worked something out. So this works out so that he wins, because if it doesn't, well, it's a queen. Now, White has only 2 choices. King h1 or king to g2. Let's look at king to h1 first. King to g2 was played, but let's take a look at what would happen if he had played this. Well, we've got the obvious move, rook takes h4. Now that threatens rook takes h2 checkmate. You know, the knight covers this square. The knight covers the rook as well. So, the only way out of this is to play king to g2. And that allows this neat little maneuver. Knight to e1, double check. So, on this double check from the bishop and the knight, well, you can't go in the corner, bishop covers it. If the king goes to g1, we've got rook to g4, and that's checkmate. Again, this square is covered by the bishop. What a diagonal again. And that leaves king to g3, and that runs into rook to g4 check. The king can't go here, can't go there, must go there, and then we've got this neat little move. Bishop to g2, checkmate. You don't see checkmates like that every day. So let's go back to this position where white took the queen with the pawn. Now, knight takes f3 check. We just got done looking at this, so the king goes to g2, the last resort. So back again to where white had nothing left but to take the queen with the pawn on h4. So knight takes f3 check. We already looked at king to g1 and how it lost. So king to g2 was actually played in the game. And now comes a neat little double check, like we saw in the variation in which white played king to knight to e1, double check, forking the queen too, but we have bigger game in mind here. Now, the king goes to g1, we've got rook to g6, mate. Again, the bishop hits this square. Nowhere to go, we can't interpose, white can't interpose anything in the way. So after this double check, the king goes to g3. If it goes here to h3, then we've got bishop g2 check, king there, rook checks, and that will actually lead to the position of the game. It's just a transposition. So the king went to g3, allowing rook to g6 check. Now the f3 square is covered by the knight and the bishop. This is covered by 3 different pieces. If the king goes to h3, we have this familiar looking checkmate. Again, that's pretty cute. Bishop to g2. So the king has no choice but to go up the board, right into enemy territory. And kings in this position, they don't usually live too long. I mean, if you're a little squeamish, you don't have to look at the rest of the game because it's going to get ugly, or pretty, depending on your point of view. So, after king to f4, rook to g4 check. Again, this square is covered, the rook is protected, this square is covered, this square is covered. There's no choice but to go further into enemy territory. And now black ended the game with knight to f3, checkmate. All the squares are covered. Now this is why that game we just looked at caught my attention, because I noticed that the diagram had a similarity to a game that I had played about 5 years ago. And I've set the position up from my game. I had the black pieces, and we can see this nasty diagonal. Incidentally, this game resulted from a Dutch defense, which is what the last game really was much like. We've got this rook here on h6, and in this game I played rook takes h2. Now, this threatens rook to h1 mate, because remember there's this bishop here sitting there on the diagonal. Now if the king takes on h2, we've got queen to h6 check, king must go to g1, and then we've got queen to h1 mate. So white didn't take the rook. He played I think he played something like d5, shutting the diagonal for the bishop. And then my queen came to h6, protecting the rook. And I won in about 5 moves later. He's really helpless. And the way that I won is I played this pawn to e5, and the knight came down and participated in the attack and ended the game. And I felt pretty good about this game with its nice little rook sack. In fact, somebody that had seen the game at the tournament even complimented me on, "Oh, what a nice sacrifice you made there." But then some months later, when I'm looking at that book, and I notice a similarity between my game and that one, I realize, wait a minute, I could have played my queen to h4 right away. I mean, this is not a complicated combination, but you only get to play a move like this once in a lifetime. And I'm threatening mate. You can't run away with the rook because it's still going to be checkmate in a couple moves. And f3 doesn't help, it's still checkmate. So there's no defense to h2. Must take the queen. Check. And it's just about checkmate. White can stick this bishop in the way, the rook takes, and it's checkmate. Which, not complicated, but it would have been a prettier way to end the game. You know, I won it anyway, but you don't get to sacrifice your queen like that every day. Well, that concludes our discussion here, and that shows why you should know a lot of games.